About 3 or so years ago, I made this BMW. Not the BMW you're thinking, but the basic mobile workbench. It is actually Steve Ramsey's design from Woodworking for Mere Mortals. Not familiar with his channel, you definitely need to go check him out. He's been my inspiration for years. And I took his design and I made my own version of it. This bench has been fantastic. It's mobile, I can move it around, works great for me in my small space. I can push it off to the side, wife can bring her car in. But it was time for an upgrade. What's up, y'all? My name's Andy. This is going to be the first video of kind of a series, I guess. I'm upgrading pretty much everything in my shop. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do videos as I'm doing it. Maybe to give you ideas of what you could do with your shop. I've gained a lot more tools over the years, a lot more little knickknacks and accessories, a lot more scrap wood. And I've got to really just sit back and figure out what I'm going to do to make the most use of my space. So in this video, the first one is I upgraded my bench top. It was way overdue. When I made this workbench originally, I went cheap. His plans called for 2 sheets of 3/4. I used 2 sheets of 3/8. It worked for a while, but it was wavy and it made assembling projects difficult. Rookie mistake, I guess. So it was time for an upgrade. I've been doing a lot more, I guess, more serious woodworking projects, and I want to get more into hand woodworking and learn more about that. So I'm going to need a better top, and it was time. Just FYI, I do get injured in this video. Nothing crazy. It was a close call, but it is in this video. And I also made a separate video just about the injury for more detail. So feel free to check that out as well. Now for my new bench top, I knew I wanted it at least 1.5 inches thick. And I also didn't want to spend a fortune. And I also didn't want it out of plywood. So what I ended up using is construction grade pine. Ended up only costing me like 40 bucks. And I'll show you how I did it. Check it out.
I went with 2x4s for my tabletop. This was inexpensive, cost me about 40 bucks. First thing I did is I ran them through the planer, the face side, because I was going to cut them in half and glue these sides together. My next step was to cut the rough length. My original tabletop was 60 inches, so I cut these to about like 60.5, 62 inches, just so I had enough once I put them all together and glued them up, I could trim them down. Using my table saw, I cut them to the rough length of 62 inches long.
Now I decided to avoid jointing both edges of the 2x4 because they're rounded. I want them square. What I'm going to do is, since I need to cut these in half anyways, and I'm just going to cut each one in half, and I'm going to put the good edge on each one up. The bottom, I don't really care if it's got that rounded edge and it's not perfectly flat, so this will work out. To find center, I used my combination square, made a square, did the X across it, I checked it, and it's perfectly center. So now I'll just cut a line through the center of that X, match it up with my saw, and then I can run this through. Should work out all right.
So I wasn't 100% on my abilities, so I cut this practice piece first just to make sure that it was going to work out and that I had my fence in the right spot and they were going to be perfectly even. And to my surprise, they were great. Now to cut the real boards. I went through, I cut all 13 boards right down the center, and that was it. It took a little time, but it worked out good. Okay, this is where things are about to get messy. First thing I did is, just like I said, I took the cut sides and faced them up, positioned them where I want them to be for the glue up. Using the cutoff pieces from the 2x4s where I cut the 62-inch lengths, I went ahead and used those as cauls, and I covered them with packing tape so the wood glue wouldn't stick to them. This was just to help keep it all flat when I did the glue up. As always, I'm going to be 100% transparent with y'all, and this was the biggest glue up I've ever done. And I thought it was going to be a lot easier than what it was. It was a mess. And mess as in, it was actually literally messy. Glue everywhere. I wasn't as ready as I thought I was for it. It it just wasn't as good as I'd like to have gone, but the final product was great, so I'm happy with it. There's some things I would do different on a big glue up like this next time, but hey, that's what we're here to do, is learn, right? After making my big mess, I had to get all these as even as possible because I really only had about an inch or so that I could afford trimming off. So that's what I did here, is I positioned them all and tried to get them as even as possible so I didn't have to trim much when I went to square it up later. I will say the cauls worked out well. I put 2 on each end and 2 in the middle. Just try to keep everything even, and they worked out well. Ha! Now to clean up my mess. It was everywhere. It was on the floor. It was all over my old workbench top, which I didn't care about that. I was going to rip that off anyways, but it was everywhere. So I did my best to clean it up with a wet rag and get the majority of it up. That way I didn't have too much to clean up later when it was dry. I actually went out of town for work, so this dried for about a week. When I got back in town, put it on the table and checked it out, and everything looked really good. I was really happy with the glue up. So then of course I took off my clamps and started to assess what I have. First thing I needed to do is square up the 2 ends. And I don't have a track saw. The way I do this, I use a square. I make a straight line, and then I take my 6 or 8 foot level, clamp it down to the board where it needs to be with my circular saw, and I use that as my guide, and it makes very accurate straight cuts without the track saw. Once I did that one side, I had to turn it around and do the other side. Basically just did the same thing on this side, and then of course once I cut both sides, I took my tape measure and I double checked to make sure it was all square. And it was square within a 1/16 of an inch. I was very happy. After getting the tabletop all nice and square, I took my battery powered electric planer and I started going to town planing. I went against the grain first, get all the high spots, and then I just started going down with the grain until I started getting a nice smooth surface. Once I did that, I started checking it with my level. I wanted to make sure it was all nice and level, at least within a 30-second. Time for the fun part. My thinking on this is I would go ahead and rip off the old one, put the new top on, fasten it down, and then go ahead and finish it off that way. This old top, when I built it, like I said, I went cheap. Well, my biggest mistake was I laid one sheet down, I screwed it to the frame, poured glue on top of it, put the next 3/8 sheet down on top of it, and clamped it down. What this did is it covered screws in between, causing some issues. And I paid the price for it right around here. Well, jacked up my face. Trying to take that thing apart, this thing came up, popped me in the face. Man, gotta be careful, y'all. Happens that quick. Luckily, I don't think it's too bad. Probably bruised, a little bit of blood. We'll be good. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how quickly you can get hurt in the shop. So be careful out there, happens quick. I did a video on this injury just to give a little more detail on what happened, and feel free to check it out. I'll link it in the description if you want to watch it. Once I finally got to that second layer of plywood, I was able to remove all the screws and pull it out easily. And from there, I just went around, pulled out all the extra screws, and it was ready for the new tabletop. All right, the controversial pocket holes. That's what I decided to use on this tabletop because one, it was easy. On the outside, I could put the pocket holes very easily. And two, I don't have to deal with the screws or glue or anything like if I ever want to replace this top like I just went through. So Sue me, I'm using pocket holes. Worked out fantastic. Cool little feature on your planer, if you didn't notice, there's a V groove and it makes a nice little chamfer. Once again, checking the levelness of the tabletop. This is after the planing, and I saw that I had some high spots in the middle, so I decided I was going to use a belt sander to bring those down and just kind of smooth everything over. As you would expect with construction grade pine, there's knot holes. There's all kinds of defects, and I knew this was going to happen. I planned for it. My solution here was I was going to make a feature out of them by using some epoxy with colored pigment. I thought it might look cool. I first circled all the spots that I knew I was going to fill with epoxy. That way it was easy to see and I didn't miss any. All right, for no other reason than I guess maybe TCU did so well, I went with purple. I have a lot of different pigments to choose from. Purple sounded good, so I went with it. I poured my epoxy. I didn't need a whole lot, so I did 1 ounce and 1 ounce with the super clear epoxy. Mixed it very well. I always mix it 3 to 5 minutes. And then I just went around and poured it in each individual spot that I wanted to fill and let it cure. All the spots are filled, and now let's let it cure. And poof, movie magic. They are cured and hard as a rock. So next thing is to sand them down. Back to belt sanding. Using 120 grit, I got them all nice and flat, and then I used my random orbital sander and went to 220. Once I did that, I felt the extra need to take these epoxy spots, the deeper ones, and give them a little buffing so they were nice and clear. This is just something extra because I thought it looked cool. Don't have to do that. Oh, very satisfying part right here. So smooth. I went ahead and I cleaned it with mineral spirits just to remove any excess sawdust or anything. Very satisfying, this part. One of my favorite parts. I really thought the epoxy spots turned out cool and it'll add a nice feature to the workbench. The next step, boiled linseed oil. I thought this would be a good coating for a workbench. It's not going to mar any of my future projects, and it should help give a protective layer even against some glue spillage and so forth, and make it easy for the glue. If it dries on it, hardens, should come up fairly easy. So that's what I went with. We'll see. Oh man, I'm thinking it looks too good to use, but then of course that's not really an option, is it? Of course I'm going to use it.
All right, so I think it turned out really good. I'm very happy with it. I'm glad I am too, because I'm going to be keeping this for a while. It's not done. I still got to do 3/4 inch dog holes for my dog wedges and dog clamps. I want to put a vise, put some drawers on it. So I've got more to do to this, and I will definitely keep y'all up to date on as I'm doing it, and I'll put the videos out for everything I do to it, whether it be a short or a long video. Learning experiences on this were, one, I think you can see in the video, is you don't take a sheet of plywood, screw it down, put glue on it, put another sheet of plywood over it, unless you're planning on that to be permanent forever, because that was a pain. Anyways, I don't even think that was in Steve Ramsey's plans. I don't know why I did that. Who knows what I was thinking. But I have a lot more that I'm going to be doing in here to get this place organized and more efficient. For instance, this plywood over here is going to be a cabinet for my planer. I'm going to build that with some drawers and make it the same height as this. Use this as an outfeed table. My scrap bin pile is so horrendous, y'all. It angers me every time I walk out here and look at it. So that is on the high end of the list to get that done first. I'll probably be doing that fairly soon. Probably right after this cabinet, I'll do that. But I'm going to video all this. I'll show it to y'all. Maybe it'll help you, and if you have a small shop or something, give you an idea for something. I just believe that tools should have a place and everything should have a place. It makes you more efficient. I don't know if any of y'all have heard of 5S, but it really does. It's proven to work. If you've got a cluster of a shop, you're not going to be as efficient. I'm sorry. Just not happening. So that's my plan. I really appreciate y'all watching my videos, and I hope y'all are enjoying them. I'll see you next time.